Back when I was a young, inexperienced study pupil, I tried this lazy approach to learning. I wanted to put in just enough effort and score well enough to breeze through school so I could enjoy my college experience. So on day one of all of my classes, I only planned to study the absolute essentials. Optional reading? Pass. Recommended textbook chapters? Doesn't sound like mandatory, so pass. Supplemental videos? Nah, I'm good. Required attendance? Alright, fine. I guess I'll do that. I remember strolling into my first midterm of Biology 2A at peak confidence. I knew all of the essential PowerPoints like the back of my hand. Wait a minute, is this allowed? Every slide, every word. And guess what? I almost failed. I got the most curveball-y, most obscure questions that I had no way of figuring out on the spot. And now, reflecting back after years of practice and studying, I realize why there's a reason we're given so many resources for learning. And it's all about mixing up our studies.
In terms of studying, mixing simply means using multiple resources for learning to improve our overall understanding. Dozens of papers have been published over the last decade confirming that diversity encourages innovation. So in the workplace, diversity in thoughts lead to better ideas. In video games, diversity in thought leads to new meta and consequently new memes. So a good demonstration of mixing comes from sports. So say you're an aspiring volleyball player for a high school team. You got the hops, but maybe not the height. You're a late bloomer. Imagine your team trains for hours and hours every day, but you only scrim within your team. And although you're all getting much better, you're really only getting better at playing each other. And when the tournament approaches and you suddenly have to battle against the iron wall of defense, well, y'all screwed. You didn't really approach volleyball from that position, did you? And that's why your clever coach sets up exhibition games and training camps and team building exercises to teach you from multiple angles.
To relate all of this to my lazy, essentials-only study approach, I was only using one resource, the PowerPoints. And when the test threw minus tempo problems at me that weren't on the slides, I lost all those points. So new perspectives force us to think about our work or studies differently and more comprehensively. Now we want to share how we've actually been using mixing to study medicine. And when we think about mixing, it's actually a two-step process that can be applied to any subject. The first step is to mix up how we take in information. One mistake I used to make while learning was accepting that I really understood something after learning it just one way. For example, when I first learned about high blood pressure, it was in the context of the heart. Certain chemicals in our body and nervous system cause our blood vessels to constrict or dilate and our hearts to beat faster or slower. I understood this relationship very well. But once I started clinical rotations and I started caring for patients on wards, there were so many nuances about high blood pressure that I didn't understand well enough to make decisions about treatment or management. How do the kidneys affect it? How does our endocrine system affect it? What about medications? And in order to fill in all those gaps in how I understood this complex topic, I needed to mix up the way I learned. So what did I do? I had different residents and attending doctors teach me the way they conceptualized high blood pressure. I read journals, papers, and clinical trials about the topic. I watched YouTube videos, not just a few. I watched playlists. I just needed new perspectives. And the more I consumed, the bigger the puzzle about high blood pressure seemed to grow. Sometimes we don't even know how little we know about a topic until we mix up the way we learn about it. I probably still don't know everything I need to know about it, but now my understanding is strong enough to where I can confidently counsel a patient about their condition.
The second step of the process is to mix up how we study that information. A common mistake I would make is to study one topic for way too long. Because whenever I had a test coming up about a week before, I would plan out a review schedule. And like most students, I approached it sequentially and logically. Like I'll review lecture 1 and 2 today, and then 3 and 4 tomorrow, and then so on. That way before the test, I'll have reviewed everything, right? It just seemed logical. But the issue with this approach was that on the day of the test, I get a question about lecture 1 or 2, and I would just completely blank out because I hadn't actually looked at that material for almost a week, and this was really frustrating. So instead, a solution I found was to study a bit of every topic each day. Like instead of dedicating an entire afternoon to just lecture 1, I can touch all the lectures in the afternoon, but just bits and pieces, and then mix back and forth between them. Sometimes I find that I know certain topics better than others, so that would be when a revision timetable can be really helpful. We've already discussed this in a previous video, but you can use something like a revision timetable to really hone in on your problem chapters. So that's how I like to think about mixing up our studies. Thinking back to our map, there are many ways to mix it up for understanding, and there are also many ways to mix it up for remembering. And this is when you can take a screenshot and send it to all your friends, but obviously it's not free. It's going to cost you a like on this video. So for example, I like using flashcards, which is why I use RemNote, which shuffles all my topics and then spaces them out for me using a built-in algorithm to offload any study planning that I need to do. As for problem sets, I like to do them at random, because when I mix up all these different types of questions, I often uncover hidden information or viewpoints about how topics are related. So ultimately, it just helps me make all these connections between everything that I'm learning. And it's also good practice, because I'll bet you big bucks that your exam is going to be randomized as well. So those are the 2 steps that we use to mix up our studies. First, I mix up how I take in the information using different resources like teachers, videos, podcasts, textbooks, so on, to really get the full picture of what I'm learning. And then I mix up how I study that information. I'm just aiming to study a bit of each topic every day and then mix up the study tools like RemNote and randomized flashcards and random problem sets and so on. So of course, mixing is just one method of learning, and it's actually best when you use it in combination with other evidence-based techniques, which we will cover right here.